Okay, so hi everyone, it's Grace, and the video that I'm going to be doing today is going to be a review of the book One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. And I wasn't actually going to do a review of this just because, if you're new here, I do mostly like to talk about fantasy books. Like, that's my favorite genre. It's not a rule or anything, I've just been mostly talking about fantasy, so I thought maybe people wouldn't be quite as interested in what I had to say about a book like One Last Stop than they would about, like, a fantasy novel. But my thoughts have been festering. Basically, I finished this book recently, last week, and I have a lot of thoughts about it, and I just want to say them because I feel like my review on Goodreads was kind of short. Like, I expressed myself, but I didn't say everything that I wanted to say. And yeah, I just have lots to say. More than I was expecting, really. So, this is going to be spoiler and spoiler free, but I will put timestamps on the video so that you can tell when I'm going to go into spoilers. But I am going to be vague at the start. So, One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston is a sapphic romance novel, and essentially our setup is that we're following a 23-year-old girl named August who is from New Orleans, and she moves to New York City because she is sort of like done with living with her single mother. She had kind of a rough upbringing, I guess, with her single mother, and she's ready to kind of separate herself, try and forge her own path and see what it is that she wants to do in life. So she moves to New York. And her mother were always sort of like independent, it's us against the world, things like that. But when August gets to New York, she starts a new job and she finds her route on the subway to take her to work. And on the subway, she meets a girl named Jane, who she kind of starts to, like, form a romance with. That's not a spoiler. That's on the synopsis. That's like the setup for the book. And then as Jane and August get to know each other better and like become friends, August realizes that Jane is trapped on the subway because she has been displaced from 1976 or 77. But that was Jane's time period, and something has happened to her where she's in sort of like a time loop or like a wormhole where she is just on the subway, the same age and everything that she was when she was in the 70s, unchanging. And that is her predicament. So as her and August get to know each other more, August wants to help Jane try and like find her way out of this, like find out what happened, what's wrong, and like, let's solve this problem. So that's the setup for the book. And this is a romance novel, and that's good. Like, that's what I went into it expecting. And then you also have those sci-fi elements where Jane is stuck in a time loop or some sort of weird time thing, and that's the mystery that they're trying to solve. And then you have some side plots as well with side characters and like the relationships between her roommates and neighbors and the pancake place where she works and things like that. So there's stuff going on. And this book, for me, felt like it didn't know what it wanted to be. And that was the major problem that I had with it. And the reason that I say that is because I liked the romance. I thought that August and Jane were cute, and I liked to watch them getting to know each other. But I won't even pretend to have read a lot of sci-fi, but the sci-fi elements kind of felt to me like they were thrown in because this was a romance, and then Casey McQuiston was like, okay, but what if we made it like a sci-fi book too? And I thought that that was the weaker side of the book because I didn't feel like that part was convincing to me. So, like I said, I haven't read a ton of sci-fi, but since I like to read fantasy, I was hoping for a really well-constructed mystery and problem that they were going to then solve, and it would be like a resolution and an explanation that would be satisfying to me. but that was where it fell off for me. I thought that the romance would have been fine had it just been a book focused on this romance that develops on the subway because August has moved to New York and she's really used to being independent. She's not used to relying on anyone. She doesn't want to fall in love with anyone. She's learning how to have friends. She's like gaining a community from where she works, and you've got like she's becoming interested in like the drag race community, and she's meeting like her neighbors that do drag, and she's kind of finding her people and finding a family. And I think that that would have been interesting on its own. I think the problem for me became when Casey McQuiston was trying to do too much with it. And the last thing that I want to mention, spoiler free, is that I felt like some of the dialogue and some of the characterizations were a little bit kind of like edgy or trying really hard to be quirky or cool. And some of it hit for me and some of the dialogue was really funny, but some of it like kind of made me roll my eyes, and it broke my immersion when that happened. And it was sort of like trying really hard to have the persona of like a Gen Z kid or like TikTok kids. But the thing is, these aren't teenagers. They're meant to be like people my age. And I get that sometimes we make jokes, but I feel like on the whole, people just don't really talk like that. So it did feel a little edgy to me, and that would take me out of the story whenever I really noticed something like that. So that is also kind of a factor that broke my immersion and didn't allow me to like go smoothly through the story. So it stuck out. But I am gonna hop into spoilers now so that I can actually explain what I mean about the previous points that I had made about the author kind of trying to do too much with this book. So basically, for me, I was not convinced by the like electricity theory and the way that Jane was trapped in the time loop. I thought it was really cheesy that it was August that somehow like excited electrical impulses in Jane's brain that then kind of anchored her here and now and helped her start to remember. Like, it's so cheesy. It just didn't, like, I get that Mila is supposed to be an electrical engineer and that is her job because she can then understand this and help the theory along, but yeah, your brain is made up of electrical impulses, but those happen whenever you do anything at all. So like Jane interacting with other passengers, helping other passengers, like forming friendships with people if they can actually see her on the train, that would all excite electrical impulses. And I get that it's supposed to be love and it's supposed to be different, but I was like, oh my word. So there's that. And I think I just didn't find it plausible. And then at the very end, you had them actually attempting to get Jane back to the past or anchor her in the present, whichever way they're going to solve the problem. And it not working until August kisses her. And I'm like, okay, it's cute. Like the romance is cute, but oh dear Lord. Like it was over the top for me, which is kind of what I meant when I said that like I would have been cool if this was just a romance between August, who like is bisexual and knows that she is, but I feel like is still very much finding herself and finding her place, and Jane, who is very much like a rough and tumble like lesbian who fought for pride back in the day. So I understand why the time loop was important in that sense, because they really wanted to explore that side of Jane. But that was who she is, very like scrappy, ready to defend herself and August. But then you also have a whole bunch of other characters who are queer or on the LGBTQ plus spectrum in this book, and I found them really interesting, really heartwarming. I loved the relationships in here, and I was happy with that side of it. And the sci-fi part was where it didn't convince me and where it fell apart for me. So in the sense that I really liked that Casey McQuiston wanted to explore what went on in the 70s about like pioneering pride and what it was like to be like a gay person or a lesbian even in the city at that time. And I liked the exploration of the mystery of August's uncle, and it turned out that he was gay and he was almost a victim of arson that was targeted towards that community, and like the AIDS crisis. All of that is very emotional and very impactful. And I like that Casey McQuiston explored that. I almost just feel like they could have executed the sci-fi elements so much better to actually convince me that this is what's happening. Because I liked both of those elements, and I understand that what I'm saying is contradictory, because if the sci-fi isn't in this book, then you don't get to explore the past from the perspective of someone who was actually there, because you need the time element in order to do that. So I don't know what I'm suggesting. I'm just saying that like there was a disconnect between those two things for me, and because there was a disconnect between those two things, that's just what made the book not quite feel cohesive to me. And I wrote in my Goodreads review that I felt like at one point when it was time for them to save the Pancake House with the drag show for charity, like I was invested in that, but I also felt like that started happening and the romance with Jane stopped happening because they had had a fight. And it was almost like Casey McQuiston was like, okay, we're going to stop doing this plot line now so that we can do this other plot line. And then we'll just kind of do this for a while, and I don't know what's happening to the Jane plot line, but we're not doing that right now. And then we're going to come together at the end. I thought that maybe it could have been woven together a little bit better, and it would have been a little bit more cohesive, and I would have maybe enjoyed it more. So on the whole, I think it had so much potential, this book, to be something really great, but ultimately I guess the execution just didn't work for me. So I will hop back over to spoiler-free thoughts now, in case anyone is coming back from the beginning of the video to hear my final thoughts. So I did end up giving this book 3.5 stars because, as I discussed a little bit in the spoiler section and earlier on, there was a lot to like about it. Like, I really, really liked the sapphic romance. I liked August and Jane individually and together. The side characters grew on me throughout the book. I really liked this book because it did have like a wide variety of people with different experiences and identities, and it just showed them coming together and being friends and having relationships. So I really, really did like the exploration of the diverse characters in here, and that was a big plus for me. And it was just really the sci-fi elements that didn't quite do it for me. So yeah, this book was a 3.5 stars for me, and I hope that if Casey McQuiston puts something else out in the future, I'm interested in it because I feel like their writing does have so much potential. I really enjoyed Red, White, and Royal Blue, and that one obviously was more of a grounded, down-to-earth romance instead of dipping into speculative elements, and maybe that's just not their strength, but then again, I'm not sure. If they put something else out, I would be totally willing to try it because I do think that this book had a ton of potential. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Like I said at the start of the video, I did have a lot to say, more than I expected to have to say, and so that's why I felt like I should do a review of this one. So I would still recommend picking up One Last Stop and forming your own opinions of it, because if you're not someone who is super worried about like whether the sci-fi elements are built up really well and you're just going to be there for the romance, I think that you could really enjoy this one. So form your own opinion on it by all means, please, and let me know what you think if you have read this book down in the comments. And thank you so much for watching this video. That is going to be it for this one. Like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more from me, and I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!